executive orders, funding cuts, abusing the legal system. These are just a few of the many tactics Donald and those in his inner circle across the Trump regime are using to arm government agencies and those who rely on government contracts and funding. Today, I want to call some attention to the real life effects that these cuts to funding and the legal attacks are having on some of our most vulnerable Americans. First, an issue we all care deeply about: public broadcasting. Public broadcasting organizations are already being forced to shut down due to some draconian federal budget cuts. Take a look at CBS Detroit with a report on this quick decline.
The Corporation for Public Broadcasting says it is shutting down after its funding was eliminated by the Trump administration and Congress. Back in May, President Trump signed an executive order instructing the organization to stop federal funding for PBS and NPR. In addition, the corporation provides money to 1,500 local public radio and television stations. Funds will end September 30th, which is when most staff members are expected to be let go.
The repercussions of this are going to be devastating. And this is far from the only example. Rural communities are already being hit particularly hard by Donald's massive public broadcasting cuts. And in some places, radio is the only way to reach people out in the most remote places. The New York Times reports that funding cuts have left 245 public broadcasting grantees in rural communities at risk of going off the air. Public radio stations across the country are being forced to cut staff and scale back services to keep from going dark. One place hit the hardest is Alaska, where 27 stations fear going out of business. Many of these stations depended on government grants for more than 50% of their annual budgets. At one local station, KUCB, they lost more than $289,000 in federal grants that it expected to get this year. The station manager, Lauren Adams, has scaled back the number of reporters in the newsroom and is even considering eliminating her own position after more than 2 decades. The Times lays out just how detrimental this is for rural communities. To report local news or go live on air during an emergency requires in-person staff. With KUCB down to just one reporter on the island full time, Ms. Adams said she did not know how the station would continue doing so in the event of a possible tsunami, flood, or even volcanic ashfall. Donald's executive branch has gutted the Federal Emergency Management Agency. As noted, they've gutted public broadcasting funding. They're gutting NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency. People in rural areas are dependent upon these things because they're extremely isolated, and it is difficult to get them information in real time about extreme weather events. Without such warnings, they are at risk of dying. People need to be told when to evacuate. And NOAA, for example, alerts people to just how extreme the weather events that are heading their way are going to be. After said weather events, FEMA is supposed to come in and help them rebuild, get them necessary supplies until things can get back to normal. Public broadcasting is vitally important in the efforts to keep rural people notified. But Donald's executive branch, this federal government, doesn't care, even if the people most directly affected, like those in rural Alaska, are the people who supported and voted for them. Donald's cuts are also hazardous to our health in other ways. Donald is denying or threatening to deny funds to states or healthcare providers for a myriad of reasons, from reproductive rights, which is to say that these states and agencies believe that women still have a right to reproductive rights, and to LGBTQ plus healthcare. The state of Maine immediately sued the Trump regime over these cuts. But on Monday, a Trump-appointed judge ruled that the cuts can remain in place while the suit is being adjudicated, Maine Family Planning says Medicaid dollars are not used for its abortion services, as if that would matter, and that the judge's ruling will destabilize the state's entire health infrastructure. Approximately 8,000 people receive family planning and primary care from its clinics, and many of them could now be at risk of losing health care. Given that rural states will be hit the hardest by Donald's Medicaid cuts, it's ironic that the Republican senators from those states voted for the bill that is going to harm their constituents. Here's PBS with more.
Rita Noel and her son Reese, who's autistic, have a close bond. But for Rita, neither happiness nor health are givens. The single mom of 3 in Morgan City, Louisiana, works part-time and depends on Medicaid for health care.
This is home for my primary care. I come here for all sorts of health care needs.
She's among some 1.4 million Louisianans on Medicaid, the joint federal and state health program for low-income people and the disabled. The Republicans' big tax cut and spending cut law puts more of the Medicaid load on states and requires more of patients, from work hours to more frequent eligibility checks.
Do you think that your Medicaid is at risk, you yourself?
I do, and I often worry about that.
She's worried about the additional paperwork falling through the cracks, and then...
And my grandbaby doesn't get the proper vaccination she needs to be able to survive by here. You know, my son won't be able to get the services he needs to thrive. I won't be able to get the services I need in order for me to be healthy. I have to be healthy in order to, make sure my family is healthy.
Maine and Louisiana aren't the only states facing steep cuts to healthcare funding, simply because the Trump regime has given itself the authority to determine a state's policies through blackmail. This is all ideological, or at least it's pretending to be. Donald is threatening to strip millions in federal grants with sex education programs that include information about transgender people. The Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families said Tuesday that these states must remove within 60 days, quote, all references to gender ideology, unquote, from their personal responsibility education program, a teen pregnancy prevention and sexual health initiative. The states could stand to lose a total of $81 million in federal grant funding. Acting Assistant Secretary of the ACF, Andrew Gradison, said, quote, the Trump administration will ensure that PrEP reflects the intent of Congress, not the priorities of the left, unquote. So, a priority on the left is for people to be sicker, for people to be denied health care for ideological reasons, for sex education funding to be withheld simply because the Trump regime disagrees that trans people have the right to exist. These people want to control everything. Donald wants all power to accrue to him, but here's the problem. They don't know anything about healthcare. They don't know anything about healthcare funding, and they don't really have any ideology other than hurting people because they don't care who they hurt, even if those in their sights happen to be their own constituents. So which vulnerable groups care will Donald cut funding for next? Well, that's an easy one. Low-income seniors, another part of the Republican Party base. Seniors in this country already struggle to afford retirement. Now low-income retirees are about to be hit even harder. The Department of Labor is refusing to release more than $300 million in funding for the Senior Community Service Employment Program, leaving thousands at risk of losing the jobs they rely on to survive. According to the National Council on Aging, NCOA, over 25,000 senior workers have been furloughed as of early August. The Department of Labor has yet to explain the funding delay, but a White House spending proposal from back in Maine criticized the program as being ineffective, accusing it of funneling funds to, quote, leftist DEI promoting entities, unquote. This is absurd and it is obscene. I do not know when supporting our seniors became a way to promote leftist DEI ideologies, but quite frankly, that's bullshit. It is just another excuse for Donald and the Trump regime to steal money from the American people. In the process, of course, they are, as is part of their agenda, hurting the most vulnerable among us. And it is time for our states to step up in any way they can and stop allowing it to happen. please take a second and like and share this video. Be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.